On the Mary Jane, Eddie Young and Arthur were discovered, leaving them no choice but to fight the human trafficking organization. The problem was that these human trafficking organization members were basically all armed with guns, causing the two men to flee in all directions. At this moment, a minor leader of the human trafficking organization shouted, "Keep an eye on things. Don't use your guns, or you'll kill our goods and you'll be waiting to have your hearts ripped out." Hearing their leader say this, his men were so frightened that they put away their pistols and turned to melee weapons. "Eddie Young, they don't seem to be using guns anymore," Arthur whispered to Eddie Young. "I know they don't use guns anymore, but they've started using knives. 1 or 2 is fine, but how am I supposed to fight these 20-odd people? You've practiced Kung Fu. Why don't you go and take them on?" "I've practiced Kung Fu, but I'm not Superman. How am I supposed to fight these 20-odd people?" Eddie Young said irritably. However, he didn't pay attention to his voice, and they overheard their argument. Immediately, a group of people rushed towards them with watermelon knives in hand. With no other option, the two could only keep hiding. By a twist of fate, Eddie Young found the container where the children were hidden. He glanced at Arthur, who was being chased, and silently prayed for him before entering the container. "Children, you can all swim, right?" The children looked at each other and finally nodded. Eddie Young finally smiled. He peeked out and, finding no enemies nearby, gestured for the children to follow. He then led them to the railing and used ropes to safely lower them into the sea one by one. Just as he was about to put the last child into the sea, gunshots rang out. Eddie Young instinctively picked up the child and rolled over, but as more and more people appeared behind him, he could only hide in a shipping container with the child in his arms, hoping to escape the pursuit. What he never expected was that a member of a human trafficking organization had been watching his movements. After seeing him and the child hide inside the container, the organization immediately locked the container from the outside. "Boss, that damn cop is in here. What should we do with them? Boss, this is bad. The police have started their assault. We need to get out of here quickly. Are there no children left?" Without the boss, they were all let go by that stinky cop. "Then let's drown him." The foreman looked at the container in front of him with a sinister gaze and said coldly. Seeing this, the other henchmen immediately brought over forklifts. With several forklifts working together, they threw the container where Eddie Young was into the sea, and a large amount of seawater immediately flooded into the container. In desperation, Eddie Young inside began searching for a way to escape. He first tried to use his pistol to break the chains outside, but because it was underwater, the power of the pistol bullets was greatly reduced, and it eventually became unusable due to water ingress. With no other option, he could only use the existing objects in the container to create an oxygen tank, but it was only enough for one person. Eddie Young looked at the child hiding in the corner, a wry smile on his face, and then gave the oxygen tank to the child, while he slowly suffocated. However, just as Eddie Young was about to completely lose his breath, the boy came to Eddie Young's side, took off the round metal tag around his neck, placed it in his palm, and then clasped Eddie Young's hand together. Accompanied by a white light being released from their palms, Eddie Young's corpse seemed to have gained a strange energy. Not only that, the metal plaque in the boy's hand broke in two, and he hung one half around Eddie Young's neck. After doing this, the search and rescue team finally arrived and rescued them from the container. None of the officers could believe Eddie Young was dead, but even if they didn't believe it, there was nothing they could do. They could only put Eddie Young's body in the freezer. At the same time, Arthur came to Eddie Young's house and opened the door to pack his things. When he saw Tom and Jerry, he picked up Tom, lowered his head and sighed. "Your master is dead. I'm so sorry. Do you want to see him one last time?" Tom and Jerry never expected that Eddie Young, whom they had just met, would die so soon. Just as they were in shock, Arthur carried them directly to the hospital morgue, where the two little guys saw Eddie Young's body. But they soon realized something was wrong. They discovered that Eddie Young had a strange energy inside him, but the energy was quickly transferred. They looked at the place where the energy had been transferred and found another Eddie Young. "Eddie Young, are you a man or a ghost?" Arthur screamed in fright. Eddie Young, who had been resurrected, was also completely bewildered. When he saw his own corpse on the bed, he was even more confused. Suddenly, Arthur shouted and then quickly took out a round metal plaque from his pocket. The fish in the center of the plaque began to swim. Eddie Young subconsciously reached out and took the metal plaque. Immediately afterwards, the metal plate began to glow, and the corpse on the bed turned into specks of starlight and disappeared. "What's going on?" Eddie Young asked, swallowing hard. You're asking me? Who am I supposed to ask? Arthur cried out in terror. He was truly panicked now. Don't get excited. This is the holy token. With the help of the Holy Child, you can gain immortality by holding the holy token when you die. At the same time, your physical abilities will also be enhanced. However, this does not mean that you are invincible because the power you gain is not complete. You need to combine the holy token completely with the holy token to obtain the true power of immortality. An unfamiliar voice rang out in the morgue. The two looked towards the door and saw a young Asian man leaning against it, looking at Eddie Young with great interest. Who are you? I'm the owner of Marvel Studios. If you need anything, you can come to me. I'm only here to pick up my runaway pet. Aren't you coming back with me? Lee Qingyue looked at Tom and Jerry. They stuck out their tongues, greeted Eddie Young, and then came to Lee Qingyue's side. This is my business card. Feel free to ask me for help if you need anything. After saying this, Lee Qingyue left a business card and then teleported away with Tom and Jerry. Seeing Lee Qingyue vanish into thin air, Arthur finally collapsed from the overwhelming pressure. Eddie Young had no choice but to find some clothes to wear and leave with Arthur. At the same time, he needed to explain the situation to the director. After all, since the Chitauri invasion, they had encountered some cases involving superpowered individuals, so they could accept the possibility of someone coming back to life. Lee Qingyue brought Tom and Jerry back to the agency. As soon as they entered, Walter quickly apologized to the two big shots and offered them a lot of delicious food to appease them. All right, we're going to the X-Men universe tomorrow. It's a special universe in the Marvel multiverse. You'll understand how special it is when you get there. Yes, boss. Received, boss. In the mutant universe, Lee Qingyue and his companions found themselves in a remote town. Is this the X-Men universe? No, to be precise, this is the mutant universe. Some of the humans on this earth have something called the X gene in their bodies. With this thing, they will awaken superpowers at a certain time. There are many kinds of these superpowers, all kinds of them. X gene. That's right, it's the X gene. Let's go. Let's figure out where we are first. Lee Qingyue and the others walked into the town. Along the way, many people cast strange glances at them. After all, this remote town is rarely visited, and they might not even see any strangers for a whole year. After wandering around for a while, they finally arrived at the outskirts of the town. So, what else have you found? Boss, I noticed that there don't seem to be any police in this town. I went to the police station, and there wasn't a single officer there, Walter said first. And you guys? Did you find anything else? Nothing much was found. But I never expected that such a remote border town would have a steel mill. That's the most unexpected thing for me, Constantine said. Steel mill? No police around. Shua, come with me. Lee Qingyue used Snape's special flight spell and took to the air, quickly finding his target. Below, a group of policemen were seen aiming their bows and arrows at a man, who turned around and surrendered. At the same time, opposite them, a girl was crying loudly in her mother's arms, and the crying attracted a large number of birds that attacked the policemen. As a result, one of the policemen lost his grip and released the arrow, which was aimed at the girl and her mother. Just when it seemed that both of them would be killed in one arrow, Lee Qingyue descended from the sky and blocked the arrow with his own body. Another mutant has arrived. Lee Qingyue ignored the group of police officers and instead picked up the girl and comforted her. Eventually, the girl calmed down in Lee Qingyue's arms, and he then handed her to her mother. You two go back first. I'll stay here and handle this matter, Lee Qingyue said to the two of them. Big brother, can you bring my dad back? Don't worry, you can definitely do it. Trust your big brother. The girl nodded, and then her mother quickly led her away from there. And then it's your turn, Oblivion. Lee Qingyue took out his magic wand and pointed it at the group of police officers, then used Oblivion on them. Soon, the police officers forgot the purpose of their visit and left the place in a daze. Thank you. No need to thank me, but there are conditions for me saving you. What are the conditions? To be a spy. What spy? You'll find out later. With that, Lee Qingyue pointed his wand at the man. Just as the man was about to use his power, Lee Qingyue was faster than him, and a streak of light struck him, causing the man to immediately become dejected. Lee Qingyue then turned and left. He had just used the forget-all technique to modify the man's memories. He then hid to the side until he saw a group of people appear and take the man away. Only then did Lee Qingyue appear. Boss, how is it going? It's all sorted out. Now we just need to wait for the enemy to appear. But in the meantime, we need to find some help. Otherwise, we won't be able to kill Apocalypse on our own. Where are we going? New York City, Xavier's School for Gifted Youngsters, also known as X Academy. The group then used magic to constantly confuse their presence, before taking a plane to New York City and finding the legendary Xavier School for Gifted Youngsters. The teachers and students at this school are all mutants, most of whom are Delta-level mutants. First of all, there are 6 levels of mutants, from lowest to highest: Epsilon, Delta, Gamma, Beta, Alpha, and the most powerful Omega. The Epsilon class makes up 20% of all mutants. This group of mutants has major flaws or is simply monstrous in appearance. They are unable to integrate into society, have difficulty living, and are not very capable. Next is the Delta level. These mutants are only slightly stronger than level 1 mutants like the Epsilon level. As level 2 mutants, Delta level mutants make up more than 50% of all mutants. They are the most numerous mutants in Xavier's Academy of Gifted Youngsters and also the largest group of mutants in the mutant population. Gamma-level mutants have flaws in their abilities, which could be physical or functional. However, these mutants are much stronger than the previous 2 types and represent a watershed moment in mutant power. Beta-level mutants are considered the strongest and most important among mutants. The most typical examples are Professor X and Magneto in the early stages. Beta-level mutants generally have a normal human appearance in their normal state, but they also have powerful abilities, although their abilities can still go out of control. Alpha-level mutants possess the appearance of normal people, powerful abilities, and the ability to control their abilities at will. A prime example is Phoenix. Finally, there is the Omega level. There is no such level as Omega in the mutant classification system. It is only because some powerful mutants, although they are also alpha-level mutants, can easily defeat other alpha mutants, that the Omega level was specially created. In other words, every Omega mutant is a level 5 mutant, but not every level 5 mutant is an Omega-level mutant. For example, Magneto was originally only a Beta-level mutant, but after Apocalypse activated his powers, he became an Alpha-level mutant. His combat strength is comparable to that of Omega-level mutants, so he is both an Alpha-level and an Omega-level mutant. Who are you? A boy who looked only 18 or 19 years old looked at Li Qingyue and his group with a furrowed brow and one hand behind his back, as if he was wary of them. Hello, we're here to see Professor Charles. This child has awakened a mutant ability, so I want him to come here to learn how to control it, Li Qingyue said, pushing Richard forward. Okay. Please wait a moment. I'll go and inform the professor to come out now. Upon hearing this, the boy released his hand and then turned and ran towards the castle behind H. Professor Charles. They are the ones who came to see you. The boy pushed a middle-aged man with long hair out, and that man was Professor Charles. Hello, I am a professor at this academy. I heard that one of your students has awakened a mutant ability, so they want to come here to learn how to control their ability. Is that right? No, Professor Charles. Upon hearing Li Qingyue change his tune, the boy pushing Professor Charles was stunned and quickly explained, Professor, I didn't lie to you. That's not what they said just now. You're lying. As the boy spoke, a chilling aura emanated from his hands. Upon seeing this, Professor Charles said in a deep voice, Robert, what have I taught you? Don't get angry so easily. You gentlemen didn't come here to study, so may I ask what you want to see me for? Can we go inside and talk? Of course, please come in. Under Professor Charles's guidance, Li Qingyue and his group saw many students practicing various abilities in the manor, abilities that even they found eye-opening. Soon they arrived inside the castle. Professor Charles asked Robert to pour tea for the group, and they didn't stand on ceremony, plopping down in their chairs. What brings you here? We want to cooperate with you to fight against Apocalypse. Apocalypse? Who is Apocalypse? Professor Charles asked, his brow furrowed. Apocalypse was born in the first dynasty of Egypt. He is the oldest and most powerful mutant on Earth, Shabapur, who once had countless followers. However, he was later betrayed and buried alive. Recently, he was dug up. The incomparably powerful and immortal Apocalypse was freed from thousands of years of burial. However, he was furious to find that his kind were no longer regarded as gods. He was filled with disgust for the human world and decided to destroy it and rebuild a new world. Li Qingyue briefly explained the origins and methods of his apocalypse, and Charles fell silent after listening to Li Qingyue's words. At this moment, Robert came out carrying several cups of tea, followed by a man wearing glasses and a young man wearing sunglasses. Hank, Scott, what brings you here? Professor, we heard we had guests, so we came to check, Hank explained. But his gaze toward Li Qingyue and the others was somewhat wary, probably because he had learned from Robert what they had just done. How can I trust you? Professor Charles asked, putting down his teacup. Believe in what? The young man wearing sunglasses asked. Professor Charles then briefly explained the apocalypse. But Hank and Scott's first reaction upon hearing the news was that they were lying. How powerful is the apocalypse you're talking about? Scott asked jokingly. At first, Apocalypse only had one ability, to transfer consciousness to create a completely new body, allowing him to reach the peak of his lifespan and physical abilities. It wasn't until he transferred his consciousness into a mutant that he discovered he could gain the mutant's abilities. So even now, I don't know exactly how many abilities he has, but I can guarantee that you alone cannot kill him. Li Qingyue wasn't angry. He simply stated the facts calmly. How do we know you're not lying? Magneto is right next to Apocalypse, and Apocalypse has a mutant ability that can develop the abilities of mutants, making him even stronger. Magneto is one of the 4 horsemen of Apocalypse that he is looking for. His ability has probably already been developed. Now, Magneto can destroy the Earth at any time if he wants to, because his ability is not to manipulate metal, but to manipulate magnetic fields. I think you should know how dangerous that is. Upon hearing this, Professor Charles immediately said to Robert, Robert, take our guests on a tour of the college. Hank is pushing me to that place. Even if they didn't say it, Li Qingyue knew that place was where the brainwave enhancement machine was stored. Although I know they don't trust me yet, it doesn't matter. They'll find out eventually that what I said is true. Professor Charles followed Hank to the location of the brainwave enhancement machine. After putting on the helmet, Professor Charles's abilities were instantly enhanced hundreds of times. He easily found Magneto's location, but because Magneto's memories had been altered by Li Qingyue, he thought that his wife and daughter had been killed by the police. So now he's entered a dark state and can't listen to anything Professor Charles says. At the same time, Apocalypse also sensed Professor Charles's presence, immediately traced back to his location, found him, and used a spatial jump to arrive at Xavier's Academy for Gifted Youngsters. Hank, Scott, and Shockwave discovered that Apocalypse and the others had suddenly appeared and immediately launched a counterattack, but they were all stopped by Magneto. Then Magneto stretched out his hand, and Professor Charles was uncontrollably placed in their hands. Just as Shockwave was about to unleash his power, Connor and Li Qingyue appeared between the two groups. At the same time Shockwave's power was released, Apocalypse had already left with Professor Charles, but the energy impact was blocked by Connor. Why are you stopping me? Shockwave demanded. If we hadn't stopped you, you would be dead by now. Look at what's over there, Li Qingyue said coldly. Shockwave looked over and found that there was nothing at the location of the energy impact except a metal door. Upon seeing this, Li Qingyue immediately took out his wand and opened the door. Behind the door was the engine of their fighter jet, which they used for travel. If the energy impact had really hit this engine, at the very least, the entire academy would have been destroyed. Shockwave knew how dangerous his actions had been. He came up to Li Qingyue and said, I'm sorry. I misunderstood you. I'm really sorry. I was just worried about the professor. Don't worry, at least for the time being, the professor will be fine. Because Apocalypse needs to switch bodies with Professor Charles, he needs Professor Charles's abilities. Now, all you need is for the professor to tell you his location, and then you can set off to rescue him. When will we have to wait? Hank asked anxiously. Don't get excited. It won't be long. Now you need to gather your strongest forces and be ready to go at any time. Hank nodded. After all, with Professor Charles gone, he, as the second in command of the academy, naturally took over the command position. He then recalled the other members of the X-Men to prepare to rescue Professor Charles. Is this the person you've been looking for? Li Qingyue asked, looking at the group of people in front of him. Isn't that enough? What about Robert? He's just a child, he can't go. Hank immediately refused. He is an Omega-level mutant with powerful abilities, so he should participate in the war. You should not suppress his abilities, Li Qingyue said. That's right, the Robert he mentioned is the Iceman, one of the most powerful mutants, provided he can fully develop his abilities. Upon hearing this, Robert, looking rather grim, said, My strength is actually quite weak. I couldn't possibly be an Omega-level mutant. No, you are an Omega-level mutant. Your abilities are extremely powerful. If developed properly, you could even freeze time and space. So don't underestimate yourself. Be confident. Understand. I still disagree. Robert is too young. Even if the professor were here, he wouldn't agree. There's no point in us saying all this. Let him choose for himself. You can choose to go or not. No one will blame you. Li Qingyue looked at Robert. Not only Li Qingyue and his group, but even Hank and his group were watching him, which made him feel immense pressure. The heavy pressure made it hard for him to breathe for a moment. Just as Hank was about to stop him, Li Qingyue took out his wand and froze everyone. Tell us what your answer is, Li Qingyue shouted, continuing to put pressure on Robert. Robert then let out a roar, and a chill swept in all directions. Li Qingyue immediately shouted, "Fire shield!" In an instant, flames enveloped everyone in the room, but the powerful cold air could even freeze the flames. Everyone was stunned to see the flames inside the ice. Robert slowly stood up. He was no longer timid. His eyes were full of confidence. "Professor Hank, I want to go." "Then go ahead," Hank said with a look of relief. Just then, Professor Charles's voice rang in their minds, and not only in their minds, but in the minds of all people on Earth. Professor Charles's words were basically a repetition of what Apocalypse had said, such as that mutants would definitely return to their former status and that he would destroy the entire Earth and so on. Humanity was thrown into panic, but at the same time Phoenix received a coded message from Professor Charles, learning that he was currently in a city in Egypt. In order to demonstrate his power, Apocalypse actually started a live broadcast so that all of humanity on Earth could see him. Apocalypse clenched his fist slightly, and instantly the entire city's buildings turned into dust. Under Apocalypse's control, the dust then coalesced back into a giant pyramid, inside which was an altar used for exchanging consciousness. What Apocalypse wants to do is switch his consciousness with Professor Charles's, so that he can gain Professor Charles's abilities, and then Earth will once again belong to him alone. The four horsemen of Apocalypse made their appearance immediately, especially Magneto. After being enhanced by Apocalypse, his combat power was approaching that of an Omega-level mutant. If given more time to adapt to this power, he would become a true Omega-level mutant. Magneto raised his hand, and all the metal within 100 miles turned into fragments and came to Magneto's vicinity. After being reassembled, they formed four watchtower-like structures, hundreds of meters high around the pyramid. Immediately afterwards, Storm and Mercy flew into the air. Storm then used lightning to strike Mercy, who released metal feathers the instant she made contact with the lightning, shooting them at the four tower-like structures. The metal feather hovered at the top of the watchtower, about a meter above the building, its lightning-infused feather floating silently in the air. At this point, the Egyptian government retaliated, sending 2 missiles hurtling towards the pyramids. "No!" Hank, who had been watching closely, shouted instinctively. "Don't get too excited. Even nuclear bombs can't harm them in the slightest, let alone these 2 small missiles." No sooner had he finished speaking than the 2 missiles were already close to the watchtower when a bolt of lightning struck them, instantly turning them into molten iron. "See? I told you it wasn't that simple. What you need to do next is speed things up," Li Qingyue said calmly. Upon seeing this, Hank immediately increased the engine speed, and the fighter jet speed increased again, finally arriving just as Apocalypse's consciousness entered Professor Charles's brain. "Nightcrawler, please, rescue the professor." A mutant who looked like a demon nodded, his body flashing inside the pyramid. He grabbed Professor Charles and instantly teleported inside the fighter jet. "Next, we need to hold off Apocalypse until Professor Charles defeats Apocalypse in his own consciousness. If he loses, then your Professor Charles will disappear completely, and Apocalypse will take his place." After saying that, Li Qingyue jumped off the plane, and the other members followed suit. Of course, those with weaker physical strength should just wait for the fighter jets to stop before making any moves. Li Qingyue looked at Magneto in the air, smiled slightly, and then removed the memory modification on him. Instantly, Magneto regained his memories. Just as he was about to say something, Li Qingyue shook his head slightly at him, because Apocalypse had already appeared behind Magneto. With no other option, Magneto could only pretend to fight Li Qingyue. Although his moves looked deadly, they actually had no power at all. The 2 of them started throwing the match openly and honestly. Apocalypse glanced at the 2 of them and then stopped paying attention to the situation because Connor and his group, as well as the X-Men, arrived. Compared to Li Qingyue, Tianchi believed that these people were the ones who were hindering him. However, before Apocalypse could make a move, Robert struck first, unleashing 2 blasts of cold air that instantly froze Apocalypse. But soon Apocalypse broke through the ice, and while the battle raged on that side, The battle in Professor Charles's consciousness space was also in full swing. However, as Apocalypse became more serious, Professor Charles's consciousness gradually shrank, and it seemed he was about to lose. Then, another figure appeared in this consciousness space. But the figure was sent flying by Tianqi's casual strike. Too weak, Tianqi said calmly. Jean, stop hiding your strength and unleash it, Professor Charles shouted as he was knocked to the ground. Apocalypse immediately sensed something was wrong. He stared intently at the figure getting up from the ground, feeling the threat of death emanating from that figure. Before he could say anything, Apocalypse's consciousness was instantly destroyed, and all he saw in the end was a phoenix figure. A city in Egypt, now reduced to ruins, with only 4 massive watchtowers and a giant pyramid remaining. Apocalypse slowly floated in the air, looking down at Li Qingyue and the X-Men like a god. Even Professor Charles had Jean control his wheelchair to come down below, and everyone stared at Apocalypse. Not only that, Magneto suddenly made a move, and the watchtower immediately turned into a large number of iron spikes that shot towards Apocalypse. However, Apocalypse simply stretched out one hand, and all the objects that were shot at him were stopped. How could this be? Do you really think I don't know your memories have been altered? Do you really think I know nothing? I am the first mutant on Earth. Even I have forgotten how many abilities I possess. But I know that none of you are a match for me. As Apocalypse spoke, he descended from the sky and stood opposite the crowd. Mutants are born to be superior. The abilities we possess are powers bestowed upon us by the heavens. But look at what you have done. You have personally shackled this supreme power. You have truly disappointed me, Apocalypse said coldly. At the same time, a powerful force struck everyone, and almost everyone was sent flying backward at the same time, including Li Qingyue and the others. So powerful. Constantine landed quickly and casually cast Bozat's lightning on him, saying, "This isn't right. The Apocalypse I remember shouldn't be this powerful." Li Qingyue muttered to himself, puzzled. However, now is not the time to investigate this matter. They need to stop Apocalypse as soon as possible, because everyone is feeling unprecedented pressure. Jean, use that energy. Otherwise, we are no match for you. But, Professor, what if I can't control myself? Jean asked hesitantly. Professor Charles was stunned upon hearing this, unsure of what to say. After all, the incomplete phoenix power within Jean's body was also extremely uncontrollable and dangerous, leaving Professor Charles in a dilemma. At that moment, Apocalypse casually waved his hand, and Magneto was sent flying. The metal he was controlling also fell to the ground, and Magneto lay on the ground clutching his head, letting out a painful howl. Marx, what's wrong with you? Professor Charles exclaimed anxiously. Charles, help me. It hurts so much. Magneto weakly called out to Professor Charles as he struggled to raise his hand from the ground. What have you done? Professor Charles roared. What did I do? I did what I believed to be the most right thing, and all those who dared to stop me will suffer and die. As soon as Apocalypse finished speaking, Scott also lay on the ground, clutching his head and howling in pain. Not only that, the intense pain caused him to completely lose control of his abilities, and laser beams shot from his eyes in all directions. In order to avoid the lasers, Jill had to hide in all directions, and finally hid behind Connor. Seeing this, Li Qingyue used his wand to knock out Scott and Magneto. We can't let him continue like this. Just as Li Qingyue finished speaking, Quicksilver stepped out and attacked Apocalypse with his incredible speed. But his attacks were like tickling him. Moreover, Apocalypse seemed to have anticipated this scene. One of his abilities was specifically designed to counter fast mutants. Apocalypse strained to focus his gaze on Quicksilver, who instantly froze in place. Just as he was about to kill Quicksilver, Li Qingyue finally made his move, forcing him back with a giant scythe. I haven't seen you in the future, so it seems you're not from this world, Apocalypse said calmly. Actually, I'm very curious about what you went through. You should have been destined to lose this battle. You're right. If things had followed the original timeline, I would have lost. But unfortunately, I once acquired the ability of an enemy. His ability was very special. It was to predict the future by changing lifespan. After I had gone through more than a dozen mutants, I finally saw the future clearly. So I started to target specific mutants, and at the same time I also obtained a kind of energy from outer space. Upon hearing about this so-called energy, Li Qingyue swallowed hard, sensing something was terribly wrong. He grabbed Quicksilver and retreated. The next second, a phoenix engulfed in black flames appeared above his head. This was the power of the Phoenix, but compared to the Phoenix power Jean had obtained, his was relatively small. Phoenix girl, I don't care what you're worried about now. If you don't take action now, Apocalypse can definitely destroy the entire world. Li Qingyue shouted loudly with his back to Qin. Seeing the Phoenix force emanating from Apocalypse, Jean no longer hesitated. She closed her eyes, and the weather instantly changed. A powerful pressure swept across the globe. Not only mutants but even ordinary people could clearly feel this pressure. They inexplicably felt a tightness in their chests, as if a mountain was pressing down on their chests. Immediately afterward, the sky in their area began to turn red. Professor Charles knew from this that Jin was going all out, so he could only shout, "Buy Jin some time. I'll go harass him in his consciousness space. You guys hold him off in the real world." After speaking, Professor Charles placed his index and middle fingers together in a sword-like gesture on his temples, then closed his eyes and directly entered Apocalypse's consciousness space. He knew how powerful Apocalypse was, but for the safety of humanity and to buy time for Jean, he had no other choice. The others were risking their lives to delay Apocalypse. Even Storm, Mercy, and Psylocke had turned against him. After all, Apocalypse's ideas were too extreme. They initially only wanted to improve their status, but never thought they would kill all of humanity. Even with the help of the three, they were still no match for Apocalypse. Among them, only Li Qingyue, Connor, and Constantine could truly challenge Apocalypse. After all three of them were quite strong, but they could only hold off Apocalypse, not defeat him. For a moment they were at an impasse, and even humans started to join in the fun. Countless fighter jets flew overhead, wanting to drop nuclear bombs to kill everyone. But they seemed to have forgotten Apocalypse's abilities. Did you see that? Humans are so stupid. After saying that, Apocalypse simply raised its head and glared. The falling nuclear bomb flew back into the fighter jet at several times the speed, and with the appearance of white light, shockwave, and mushroom cloud, a nuclear bomb exploded. What makes you humans think you can kill me, a god, with a nuclear bomb? Apocalypse fought against the crowd while turning his head, and his eyes met those of the Apocalypse on various screens. Looking into Apocalypse's emotionless eyes, the humans felt a chill run down their spines. Just then, a clear cry rang out, and Qin, her entire body radiating a magnificent red energy, descended from the sky between Tianqi and the others. The moment she landed, a wave of energy swept towards them, causing some of the weaker beings to retreat continuously.